$6 million, the Osage Giants' last stand. Black smoke rises from a smoldering letter, carrying with it the first spark of a looming storm. The Osage warriors watch silently as their supposed fate burns to ash, a piece of paper claiming their vast hunting grounds now belong to strangers across the ocean. Little did the Americans know, this proud nation would not yield quietly. Welcome to Native Legends and History Stories. Join us as we uncover the raw, untold stories of America's indigenous peoples. Subscribe now to journey through time with the nations that defined our continent's soul. The year is 1804. Through the morning mist, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark's expedition encounters a French trader paddling downstream, his canoe heavy with pelts and urgent news. The mighty Osage have just received word that their ancestral lands, stretching across endless prairies and rich river valleys, have been sold in a deal between France and a young American nation. A deal made without a single Osage voice. While their domains remain vast and fiercely guarded, storm clouds gather on the horizon. Armed with generations of trading experience, from French muskets to Spanish gold, the Osage have built themselves into a formidable power. Their warriors, led by chiefs like the legendary Black Dog, a towering figure at 6'6", strike fear into enemies across the plains. As the Comanche raids threaten their western borders, Black Dog leads a daring night raid that would become legend. Under the cover of darkness, his war party infiltrates a Comanche settlement. They emerge with hundreds of prized horses, but Black Dog isn't satisfied with mere theft. He enters an enemy lodge alone, his tomahawk glinting in the firelight, and announces himself to his sleeping foe. I am Black Dog. The message is clear. The Osage may trade, but they will not be traded away. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., President Thomas Jefferson recognizes the delicate balance of power. He writes candidly to his Secretary of the Navy, "The truth is, the Osage are the great nation south of the Missouri, as the Sioux are great north of that river. With these two powerful nations we must stand well, because in their quarter we are miserably weak." The Osage know the game of empires well. They've dealt with French traders and Jesuit missionaries, sent chiefs to the court of King Louis XV, and watched Spanish authorities fail to break their grip on the plains. But now they face a different kind of challenge, one that can't be solved with raids or treaties alone. Long before American flags flew over the plains, the Osage people, known in their ancient tongue as Neokanska, children of the Middle Waters, built their civilization where mighty rivers converge. In their lodges, stories passed down through generations tell of their sacred bond with these waters, carrying the wisdom of centuries in their flow. Each morning, smoke rises from Osage villages as families begin their daily rituals. Women's fingers work swiftly through earth dark with promise, planting corn, beans, and squash in careful rows. Their bodies adorned with intricate tattoos and gleaming jewelry, they move with practiced grace. Nearby, hunters prepare for the day, their skin painted in bold patterns that tell stories of courage and lineage. Above them all, morning prayers rise to Wakanda, the cosmic force that binds all life together. The Osage territory stretches so vast that the seasons dictate their movement. During summer months, entire villages pack their belongings and follow the bison herds across the grasslands. The well-worn path they follow is Black Dog's Trail, a route carved by the towering Osage chief to guide both peaceful migrations and swift war parties. When winter winds begin to bite, families break into smaller groups, seeking shelter in protected valleys. But in 1808, a different kind of threat emerges. Meriwether Lewis, the same man who once sought peaceful passage through their lands, now sits as governor of Louisiana. His strategy is as simple as it is cruel. Strangle the Osage's trade routes, turn their neighbors against them, force them to their knees. William Clark, his old companion, presents a treaty to the Osage chiefs. The document's English words hide a terrible truth. It demands not just shared hunting rights, but the surrender of 50 million acres, half their ancestral domain. The chiefs who place their marks on the treaty believe they're agreeing to share hunting grounds, a concept familiar to their way of life. They don't understand that in American eyes, their signatures surrender the land entirely. It's a devastating miscalculation. The Osage, who make every major decision by consensus of their entire people, watch helplessly as a handful of signatures tear their world apart. Soon, Cherokee families appear on Osage hunting grounds, sent by a government eager to clear its eastern territories. Chief Claremore, one of the most respected Osage leaders, sees the danger clearly. In a council meeting with his warriors, his deep voice carries across the fire. When we want meat for our women and children, and clothing, our dependence is in the woods. If we do not get it there, we must go hungry and naked. His voice rises with controlled anger. When the president gave the Cherokees land we had sold him, he certainly did not give to the Cherokee all the beaver, bear, buffalo, and deer on our lands. The warning goes unheeded. Blood soon stains the grass where deer once grazed. Young Osage warriors, their families' hunger burning in their hearts, clash with Cherokee hunters. Each confrontation adds fuel to a fire the American government is all too happy to watch burn. By 1817, desperation stalks both sides. When Chief Claremore leads his strongest warriors to the plains for the hunt, he leaves behind a village of women, children, and elders. None of them know that this ordinary separation will soon become something far more terrible. At dawn, with screams and gunfire, Cherokee warriors and their American allies pour between the longhouses like floodwater. Bullets tear through wooden walls, arrows find flesh, and war clubs splinter bones. Dozens of Osage fall in those first brutal moments. The survivors, mostly women and children, stumble through smoke as rough hands bind them with ropes. The attackers work methodically, first killing, then capturing, then looting everything of value. When they finish, torches touch dry wood, and generations of Osage history vanish in flames. Miles away, Black Dog's people hear the distant screams. Their chief's wisdom saves them. Months earlier, he ordered the construction of a hidden cave system, anticipating such attacks. From this sanctuary, they watch helplessly as columns of black smoke rise from their village. The raiders move through their homes like hungry wolves, taking what they please. But they find no victims, only empty lodges and cold fires. This raid marks a turning point. The Osage, once masters of vast hunting grounds, now face enemies on all sides. White settlers bring more than just weapons. They carry invisible killers. Disease sweeps through Osage camps like prairie fire. Smallpox leaves bodies in its wake, while measles claims the young and old. The survivors emerge to find their world transformed. The buffalo herds that once darkened the horizon have vanished, along with the deer and elk that sustained their people for generations. Desperation forces the unthinkable. Osage chiefs, seeing their people starve, surrender most of their territory to the American government. The payment they receive mocks their loss: crates of damaged trade goods, broken tools, and spoiled supplies. Their domain, once spanning horizons, shrinks to a narrow strip of land barely sufficient for survival. But desperation breeds violence. In 1833, Osage scouts bring word of Kiowa hunters in their remaining territory. The response is swift and merciless. Warriors gather in the pre-dawn darkness, painting their faces black, the mark of a death squad. No prisoners will be taken, no mercy shown. They find a Kiowa camp, but there are no warriors to fight, only elders, women, and children. The warriors' code breaks under the weight of accumulated grievances. They take 2 children captive, then unleash their fury on the rest. In a final act of calculated brutality, they place the victims' heads in brass cooking pots, a message that will haunt the Kiowa for generations. In their winter camps, Kiowa historians mark their calendar with grim precision. The summer they cut off our heads. The Kiowa and their Comanche allies prepare for blood vengeance, but the U.S. government intervenes. They broker peace between the tribes, not out of concern for lives, but because stable territories are easier to seize. The government's true agenda becomes clear as cotton plantations spread across the South like a creeping vine, demanding more land, more labor, more profit. The cost in human suffering is staggering. In 1838, American soldiers force 15,000 Cherokee from their homes at gunpoint. Through winter storms and freezing rivers, they march 5,000 miles to designated Indian territory. Disease, exposure, and exhaustion claim 4,000 lives, grandparents, mothers, children. Their frozen bodies mark each mile of what becomes known as the Trail of Tears. For the Osage who resist reservation life, the response is equally brutal. American soldiers drag them from their homes. Those who resist face rifle butts and bayonets. Government officials justify this violence by pointing to past Osage raids, using isolated incidents to paint an entire people as savages unworthy of their land or rights. Yet this narrative of savagery crumbles before eyewitness accounts. Jesuit missionaries who lived among the Osage tell a different story. Few nations in this region show such affection and friendship, one writes. They greet strangers with open arms, share their last morsel of food, and would rather go hungry themselves than see a guest leave their village unfed. Another observer notes how Osage families divide their meals with travelers, maintaining their hospitality even as poverty and hardship stalk their people. Black Dog, the towering chief who built both physical trails and paths to survival, dies in the mid-19th century. His passing marks the end of an era. When civil war tears America apart in the 1860s, the Osage, having seen too much bloodshed, strive for neutrality. Their own bitter history has taught them the true cost of taking sides in others' wars. The Civil War brings new forces to Osage territory. Confederate agents arrive with tempting promises, greater sovereignty, and increased payments in exchange for alliance. Their words find willing ears among some Osage warriors, but most of the tribe remembers broken American promises too well to trust these new ones. The price of this loyalty comes due when Confederate agents cross Osage land. They kill an Osage man, perhaps thinking distance from Union forces grants them immunity. They learn too late about Osage justice. Warriors track them down, execute them, and leave their severed heads as warnings to other trespassers, the same fate that has awaited intruders for generations. When the war ends, the Osage face familiar patterns. Black Dog's son, inheriting both his father's name and burden, watches helplessly as more settlers push onto Osage land. The U.S. government's response is predictable. Instead of protecting Osage boundaries, they pressure for more land concessions. Across the continent, proud nations that once controlled vast territories now find themselves confined to reservations, narrow strips of land deemed worthless by white settlers. The Osage make a strategic decision, selling their remaining land to purchase a portion of their ancestral territory as a reservation. But the land they once knew transforms before their eyes. Metal screeches against metal in new factories. Hammers pound from dawn to dusk, raising wooden houses where buffalo once grazed. Black smoke from steam engines stains the sky that once carried only cooking fires. White farmers' children play in fields where Osage hunters once tracked deer. Years earlier, an Osage chief had observed this advancing tide of civilization with piercing insight. Speaking to an American official, he said, "I see your way of living, your warm houses, your cattle and horses, your wagons and countless machines. But I also see the chains that bind you. You have become slaves to your own creations. Speak to my sons if you wish. Perhaps they will embrace your ways. But I was born in freedom, lived in freedom, and I will die in freedom." In the valleys where Osage hunters once tracked buffalo, spring grass grows untouched. The plains lie quiet, the great herds only a story told to children. As Congress passes laws to slice reservation lands into individual parcels for sale to white settlers, the Osage make one final crucial stand. Under Black Dog 2's leadership, they negotiate terms no other tribe had secured. While others may claim the surface land, everything beneath remains Osage property. This single decision changes everything. In 1897, the first oil prospectors arrive on Osage land. They find not just traces of oil, but vast underground lakes of it. The black crude beneath Osage soil becomes a river of wealth. Every Osage member receives a headright, a share in the mineral trust. Lease payments and royalties transform a people who recently faced starvation into the wealthiest per capita community in America. By 1925, Osage oil fields have generated more money than the California Gold Rush, the Colorado Silver Boom, and the Klondike Gold Rush combined. Wealth brings new dangers. White guardians, appointed by the government to protect Osage interests, steal millions through fraudulent schemes. Corrupt lawyers forge documents to seize oil rights. Then the murders begin. Osage people die in suspicious fires, disappear on hunting trips, succumb to mysterious illnesses. Local law enforcement looks away as killers circle ever closer to the oil money. The fight moves from the plains to marble courtrooms in Washington. Instead of war parties, the Osage send legal teams. Their weapons are now affidavits and testimony, their battles fought through congressional hearings and federal investigations. They learn to guard their rights with paperwork instead of arrows, to defend their future with laws instead of warriors. Today, oil still flows from Osage land. Their mineral council meets in modern offices, managing resources their ancestors couldn't have imagined. In their homes, children learn both the old stories and new ways to protect what remains. Thanks for watching. Join us at Native Legends and History Stories for more untold tales of America's indigenous peoples. Subscribe now to explore the true stories that shaped our continent. Stories of power, sacrifice, and survival that deserve to be remembered.